Chosen one, stop for a moment and listen closely, because there is a reason these words found you today. You may have called certain moments coincidences, unexpected meetings, strange delays, repeated signs, or even unexplained changes in your life, but heaven has been moving through what you could not understand. The letter J was never random. It represents something God allowed to cross your path for a reason. What looked ordinary carried meaning. What felt confusing carried direction. What seemed delayed carried preparation. You are being reminded that God does not waste encounters, seasons, names, messages, or moments. Something connected to J is part of a greater purpose unfolding now. Chosen one. You have been asking yourself why this particular person, this particular name, this particular letter, or this particular connection keeps appearing in your life. You may have tried to dismiss it. You may have told yourself that you were simply noticing it because it had become familiar. You may have even wondered whether you were reading too much into something that seemed insignificant. But there are moments when something ordinary becomes impossible to ignore, because it keeps touching the same place inside your spirit. And that is where you need to slow down. Not everything that happens around you is a divine sign, and not every person who enters your life has been sent to stay forever. But there are encounters that carry lessons. There are people who arrive carrying a mirror. There are names that become attached to seasons of transformation. There are moments that awaken something in you that had been asleep for years. And sometimes God uses something as simple as a letter, a name, or a repeated reminder to get your attention when your heart has been too distracted to hear Him clearly. That is why J was never random. The significance may not be in the letter itself. The significance may be in what God is revealing through what that letter represents in your story. Think about it. Chosen one. Why does this particular name stand out? Why does it keep returning to your thoughts? Why does something connected to J seem to appear at moments when you are questioning your direction? Why did this person enter your life during a season when you were changing? Why did this connection affect you in a way you did not expect? Why did it expose emotions, fears, hopes, wounds, or dreams that you had buried? Sometimes God does not send a message in the form we expect. Sometimes He sends an encounter. Sometimes He sends a person who forces you to see yourself differently. Sometimes He allows a connection to reveal what you are ready for and what you are not ready for. Sometimes the person is not the destination. Sometimes the person is the doorway. And sometimes the person is simply the evidence that you are entering a new chapter. Chosen one, you have spent enough time questioning whether you imagined everything. You have spent enough time wondering whether the timing meant something. You have spent enough time replaying conversations, remembering glances, analyzing silence, and asking why something that seemed so small could have such a large impact on you. You are not being called to obsess over the person. You are being called to understand the season. That distinction matters. Because when God is doing something in your life, He does not want you trapped in confusion. He wants you awakened to purpose. He wants you to recognize what the experience is teaching you. He wants you to become more discerning, not more dependent on signs. Maybe J represents someone who entered your life unexpectedly. Maybe J represents someone you thought you had forgotten. Maybe J represents someone whose presence challenged you. Maybe J represents someone who walked away and left you wondering why. Maybe J represents someone who appeared when you were at your lowest. Maybe J represents a future you cannot see yet. Maybe J represents something entirely different. But whatever it represents, do not miss the lesson because you are too focused on the symbol. God can use a symbol to point you towards something deeper. The symbol is not the source. God is. And that means you do not need to worship the sign. You need to follow the wisdom the sign awakens in you. Chosen one, there is something happening in your life that requires a different level of discernment. You are entering a period where not everything will be obvious. Some things will arrive quietly. Some opportunities will look ordinary. Some doors will not announce themselves as doors. Some relationships will begin without you understanding their significance. You have been trained to expect the miraculous to look dramatic, but sometimes the miracle looks like a conversation. Sometimes it looks like a delay. Sometimes it looks like a person saying one sentence that stays in your mind for months. Sometimes it looks like a closed door that protects you from walking into the wrong future. Sometimes it looks like a name you keep encountering when you are standing at the edge of transformation. That is why you must pay attention without becoming consumed. There is a difference between spiritual awareness and spiritual obsession. Awareness says, God, what are you teaching me? Obsession says, God, prove to me that this person is the answer. Awareness seeks wisdom. Obsession seeks confirmation. Awareness allows God to lead. Obsession tries to force a conclusion. And chosen one, you cannot force what God has designed. If J is connected to your purpose, you will not have to destroy your peace trying to make it happen. If a person is meant to play a significant role in your next chapter, God is capable of arranging the timing. If an opportunity is truly yours, you do not have to manipulate every circumstance to hold on to it. What belongs in your life will not require you to become someone you were never created to be. You have been through enough situations where you had to chase clarity, enough situations where you were the only one asking questions, enough situations where you were trying to convince someone to see your value, enough situations where you confused emotional intensity with divine alignment. This season is different. God is teaching you to recognize peace, not laziness, not passivity. Peace. There is a kind of peace that arrives when you stop fighting what is not yours. There is a kind of peace that comes when you stop demanding answers before their time. There is a kind of peace that appears when you realize that God can reveal the meaning of something without giving you the entire story at once. Chosen one, perhaps, J, entered your story to awaken something in you. Maybe you had forgotten how deeply you could care. Maybe you had forgotten that your heart could still feel something after disappointment. Maybe you had become so guarded that you stopped believing anything meaningful could happen again. Then suddenly, something connected to appeared, and your emotional world shifted. You started thinking differently. You started praying differently. You started questioning what you really wanted. You started seeing the parts of yourself that needed healing. You started realizing that the life you were living was not necessarily the life you were meant to continue living. And perhaps that is the reason, not because J is necessarily your final destination, but because J became part of the process through which God got your attention. Some people are assigned to your life for a lifetime, some for a season, some for a lesson, some for a turning point, and some are there simply to activate something that was already inside you. You must stop measuring divine purpose only by permanence. Something does not have to last forever to matter. A season can be temporary and still be transformative. A conversation can last 5 minutes and change your thinking for 5 years. A person can leave your life and still leave behind wisdom. A closed door can redirect you toward the exact place you were supposed to be. So do not assume that something had no purpose simply because it did not happen the way you expected. God's purpose is larger than your original interpretation. Chosen one, maybe you thought J meant one thing, but heaven is showing you something else. Maybe you thought it meant romance, but it was actually about healing. Maybe you thought it meant reunion, but it was actually about closure. Maybe you thought it meant an opportunity, but it was actually about preparation. Maybe you thought it meant another person, but it was actually about discovering yourself. This is why you cannot rush to label the meaning. Let the meaning unfold. You do not have to know everything today. You only need enough light for the next step. And that is how God often leads. Not with the entire map, with the next step. You want to know where everything is going, but sometimes knowing too much too early would interfere with what needs to develop inside you. If you knew every detail, you might try to control every detail. If you knew every person involved, you might force relationships that need to develop naturally. If you knew every obstacle ahead, fear might cause you to stop before you ever reach the promise. So sometimes God gives you a whisper instead of a blueprint. Sometimes He gives you a feeling that something is shifting. Sometimes He places a name in your path. Sometimes He allows a repeated reminder. And then He watches what you do with it. Will you panic? Will you chase? Will you become obsessed? Or will you become still enough to listen? Chosen one, this is your invitation to become still. Not because nothing is happening. Because something is happening beneath the surface. There are things you cannot see yet. There are conversations you have not had. There are decisions people have not made. There are opportunities that have not appeared. There are doors that are still being prepared. There are parts of you that are still being strengthened. You keep asking, when will it happen? But God may be asking, who are you becoming while you wait? That question changes everything, because the purpose of waiting is not always to make you patient. Sometimes waiting makes you ready. There is a difference. You may be praying for something you are not emotionally prepared to carry. You may be asking for a relationship while still carrying the fear created by your previous relationship. You may be asking for influence while still needing approval from everyone around you. You may be asking for success while still believing that failure defines you. You may be asking for your next chapter while secretly trying to return to the previous one. God is not simply preparing the blessing. He is preparing the person who will carry it. And chosen one, that person is you. That is why this season has felt strange. You are shedding identities. You are questioning habits. You are becoming more selective. You are noticing what drains you. You are recognizing patterns that you once ignored. You are realizing that not everyone deserves access to you. You are learning that being available to everyone does not make you loving. Sometimes it makes you exhausted. You are learning that forgiveness does not always mean reconciliation. You are learning that love does not require self-abandonment. You are learning that compassion does not mean ignoring boundaries. You are learning that faith does not mean refusing to use wisdom. And perhaps J is connected to that awakening. Perhaps something about this situation forced you to confront the version of yourself that you had outgrown. Maybe you saw how much you still wanted validation. Maybe you realized how easily uncertainty could consume your thoughts. Maybe you discovered that you were still waiting for someone else to choose you when God was teaching you to choose yourself. That revelation may hurt, but it is holy, because sometimes the thing that exposes your weakness becomes the thing that leads you into strength. Chosen one, do not be ashamed of what this experience revealed. If J made you realize that you were still carrying insecurity, thank God for the revelation. If J made you realize that you were afraid of abandonment, thank God for the revelation. If J made you realize that you had been settling, thank God for the revelation. If J made you realize that your standards had disappeared because you were afraid of being alone, thank God for the revelation. If made you realize that you were capable of loving again, thank God for that too. Not every revelation feels comfortable, but revelation is often the beginning of transformation. You cannot heal what you refuse to see. You cannot release what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot step into something new while pretending the old thing did not shape you. And maybe this is why the letter keeps appearing. Not because you are supposed to chase a person, because you are supposed to remember what this chapter awakened. Chosen one, there is a reason certain memories have become louder lately. There is a reason you have started looking back at choices you made. There is a reason you have been thinking about where you are going. You are approaching a decision point. Something inside you knows that you cannot remain exactly where you have been. You may still be physically in the same place, but internally you have moved. Your priorities are changing. Your tolerance is changing. Your vision is changing. Your understanding of love is changing. Your understanding of success is changing. Your understanding of purpose is changing. And when your inner world changes, your outer world eventually has to respond. That is why certain connections become uncomfortable. The old version of you could tolerate things the new version cannot. The old version of you could accept confusion. The new version wants clarity. The old version could chase. The new version understands alignment. The old version feared losing people. The new version fears losing itself. That is growth. And growth often feels like grief, because you are saying goodbye to versions of yourself that once protected you. Chosen one, perhaps J, is connected to a person who sees something in you that you had forgotten. Perhaps their presence reminded you that you are still capable of dreaming. Perhaps they challenged you to become more honest. Perhaps they made you realize that you want something deeper than what you have been accepting. But do not make the mistake of believing that another person's recognition creates your worth. Your worth existed before they noticed you. Your purpose existed before they met you. Your calling existed before their name entered your story. God did not need J to make you valuable. God may have used J to remind you that you already were. That distinction will protect your heart. Because if you believe that another person is the source of your purpose, you will become terrified of losing them. But when you understand that God is the source, you can appreciate the connection without worshiping it. You can love without clinging. You can care without controlling. You can wait without begging. You can walk away without believing your future has ended. You can allow God to reveal what is true, and that is where your power returns. Chosen one, there is a maturity coming over you. You are becoming less impressed by words and more attentive to actions. Less fascinated by potential and more aware of consistency. Less interested in temporary excitement and more interested in lasting peace. You are realizing that someone can have chemistry with you and still not have the capacity to build with you. You are realizing that someone can care about you and still not be ready for you. You are realizing that timing matters, character matters, consistency matters, and above everything, alignment matters. So if J is meant to remain connected to your life, let the connection reveal itself through reality. Do not create a future from a few signs. Do not build a relationship from imagination. Do not assign divine meaning to behavior that contradicts wisdom. God does not need you to ignore reality in order to believe. Faith and discernment can exist together. You can believe that something has meaning while still allowing time to reveal what that meaning is. You can pray without pretending you already know the answer. You can hope without making a promise God never made. You can remain open without becoming vulnerable to every possibility. This is the balance you are learning. And chosen one, balance is part of your preparation, because the next chapter of your life will require you to recognize opportunities without chasing every opportunity. You will need to recognize people without giving everyone access. You will need to recognize signs without becoming dependent on signs. You will need to recognize doors without forcing doors open. You will need to recognize God's movement without trying to control God's timing. And this is where J becomes more than a letter. It becomes a reminder to pay attention, a reminder to seek wisdom, a reminder to examine your heart, a reminder that what seems random can become meaningful when viewed through the larger story of your life. Chosen one, Maybe you have been wondering why God allowed you to meet certain people. Maybe you thought some connections were mistakes. Maybe you believed you wasted years. Maybe you regret trusting someone. Maybe you regret walking away from someone. Maybe you regret staying too long. But what if God can use even the parts you regret? What if the chapter you wish you could erase became part of the wisdom you need now? What if the heartbreak taught you boundaries? What if the disappointment taught you discernment? What if the betrayal taught you self-respect? What if the waiting taught you patience? What if the loneliness taught you dependence on God? What if the confusion taught you to stop relying on appearances? What if the ending prepared you for a beginning you could not yet see? This does not mean every painful thing was sent by God. It means God can bring purpose out of what hurt you. He can redeem what you thought was wasted. He can transform the lesson without glorifying the pain. And that is powerful, because you are not your worst experience. You are not the person who rejected you. You are not the relationship that failed. You are not the opportunity that disappeared. You are not the season when everything seemed delayed. You are becoming someone who understands what those moments were trying to teach you. Chosen one, when you look at Jay, look deeper. Ask yourself, what did this awaken in me? What did this teach me? What did this reveal? What did I begin to understand after this entered my life? What changed inside me? Those questions may lead you somewhere more profound than simply asking whether Jay is coming back. Because perhaps the greater miracle is not the return of a person. Perhaps the greater miracle is the return of your confidence, the return of your faith, the return of your vision, the return of your ability to hope, the return of your ability to love without losing yourself, the return of your ability to believe that your future is still alive. Chosen one, you are not being punished because you do not have all the answers yet. You are being prepared to handle answers with maturity. There are things you will understand later that would make no sense right now. There are moments you will look back on and finally say, "No, I understand why that happened." You will realize why a certain door closed, why a certain person disappeared, why a certain opportunity failed, why a certain connection appeared, why a certain delay protected you, why you had to spend time alone, why your plans did not unfold according to your schedule. And when that understanding comes, you will not be angry about the delay. You will be grateful for the protection. That is why you must not judge your current chapter too quickly. You are standing inside a story whose ending you cannot see. And if Jay is part of that story, let God determine the role. Do not assign the role yourself. Let God write it. Let time reveal it. Let character confirm it. Let peace accompany it. Let truth stand behind it. And let your faith remain anchored in God rather than in what a person does or does not do. Chosen one, something is shifting. You can feel it. The old distractions are losing their power. The old cycles are becoming exhausting. The old excuses are becoming impossible to believe. You are starting to recognize that you cannot keep asking God for a new life while protecting the habits that belong to the old one. You cannot keep praying for purpose while refusing discipline. You cannot keep asking for healthy love while accepting unhealthy patterns. You cannot keep asking for clarity while entertaining confusion. You cannot keep asking for divine alignment while repeatedly choosing what violates your peace. This is not condemnation. This is awakening. And perhaps Jay became part of that awakening because the encounter forced you to confront what you really want. Maybe you want depth. Maybe you want commitment. Maybe you want honesty. Maybe you want peace. Maybe you want someone who does not make you question where you stand. Maybe you want a life that feels intentional instead of accidental. Then become intentional. Become the person who is prepared for what you are praying for. Chosen one, you cannot control who stays, but you can control who you become. You cannot force someone to understand you, but you can understand yourself. You cannot make someone choose you, but you can choose what honors your soul. You cannot predict the future, but you can prepare for it. And you cannot know every reason God allowed Jay to appear, but you can ask what this moment is producing in you, because sometimes the answer is not outside you. Sometimes the answer is growing inside you. The strength you did not have before, the wisdom you did not possess before, the boundaries you did not understand before, the courage you did not believe you had before, the patience you never wanted to learn, the faith you never knew you needed. This is what makes your journey different. You are not simply waiting for something to happen. You are becoming someone. And chosen one, becoming is holy work. There are days when you will feel like nothing is moving, but roots grow in silence. Foundations are built beneath the surface. Character develops when nobody is applauding. Faith becomes stronger when circumstances refuse to cooperate. And sometimes the quietest seasons are the ones preparing the loudest breakthroughs. So do not despise the quiet. Do not mistake silence for abandonment. Do not assume that because you cannot see movement, nothing is happening. God can be working in places you cannot access. He can be preparing circumstances you cannot control. He can be changing hearts you cannot reach. He can be opening doors you have not discovered. He can be protecting you from things you never knew were coming. And perhaps one day you will look back at J and realize that the entire situation was not about what you thought it was about. Maybe it was about timing. Maybe it was about healing. Maybe it was about preparation. Maybe it was about redirection. Maybe it was about learning to trust without needing constant confirmation. Maybe it was about discovering that you can feel deeply without losing yourself. Maybe it was about realizing that your life is bigger than one connection. Maybe it was about teaching you that God's plan can include people without being dependent on them. And that is a lesson worth carrying forward. Chosen one, J, was never random in the sense that your experience has meaning. But do not reduce God's mystery to one letter. Do not make the symbol bigger than the God who allowed you to notice it. The purpose is not to chase signs. The purpose is to become sensitive to wisdom. The purpose is to listen. The purpose is to grow. The purpose is to recognize what is being formed inside you. And as you continue forward, remember this: you do not need to force the next chapter. You need to be ready for it. You do not need to chase every possibility. You need to recognize what carries truth. You do not need to demand immediate answers. You need to remain faithful while the answers unfold. You do not need to fear losing what God has ordained. If it is truly meant to remain, it will not require you to destroy yourself to keep it. And if something leaves, that does not mean God has abandoned you. Sometimes removal is preparation. Sometimes distance is protection. Sometimes silence is instruction. Sometimes waiting is construction. Sometimes an ending is simply the boundary between one chapter and another. So when you see J, again, do not panic. Do not immediately build a story around it. Pause, breathe, pray. Ask what it is teaching you. Ask what it is revealing. Ask what kind of person you are becoming. Ask whether the connection produces peace, wisdom, honesty, and growth. Ask whether you are being drawn closer to God or becoming consumed by the symbol. Because the closer you get to purpose, the more important discernment becomes. And chosen one, you are entering a season where discernment will matter. You will have choices. You will have invitations. You will have people returning. You will have new people appearing. You will have opportunities that look exciting. You will have opportunities that look ordinary. You will have moments when your emotions tell you one thing while wisdom tells you another. And in those moments, remember what this season taught you. Do not choose merely because something feels intense. Choose what is aligned. Do not choose merely because someone recognizes you. Choose what respects you. Do not choose merely because a door opens. Ask where the door leads. Do not choose merely because something feels familiar. Sometimes familiarity is simply an old pattern wearing a new face. And do not reject something merely because it is unfamiliar. Sometimes growth feels uncomfortable precisely because it is new. Chosen one, this is why you are being sharpened. You are learning to distinguish attraction from alignment, attention from intention, chemistry from compatibility, potential from reality, hope from fantasy, waiting from stagnation, faith from denial. And once you learn those distinctions, you will stop giving every coincidence authority over your emotions. You will notice signs without becoming controlled by them. You will appreciate people without making them idols. You will remain hopeful without becoming desperate. You will move forward without needing every question answered. And when the meaning of J becomes clear, whether it involves a person, a lesson, a transition, a calling, or something you cannot yet name, you will be ready to understand it from a place of maturity rather than fear. Because maybe the real reason J crossed your path was not simply to tell you something about another person. Maybe it was to tell you something about yourself. Maybe it was to remind you that your heart is still alive. Maybe it was to awaken a dream. Maybe it was to expose a wound. Maybe it was to teach you patience. Maybe it was to strengthen your boundaries. Maybe it was to redirect your attention. Maybe it was to prepare you for a decision. Maybe it was to make you question the life you had settled for. Maybe it was the beginning of a chain of events that you cannot yet see. And chosen one, if that is true, then the story is still moving. You have not reached the point where everything makes sense. You are still in the middle, still learning, still becoming, still watching, still praying, still growing, still receiving pieces of a picture that has not yet been completed. So do not rush the revelation. Do not force the answer. Do not turn one letter into an entire prophecy. Let God be God. Let the season breathe. Let reality speak. Let time confirm. Let wisdom guide. And let your heart remain open without handing over the steering wheel. Because there is something ahead of you that requires the version of you being built right now. The version that no longer chases. The version that no longer begs. The version that no longer settles. The version that no longer confuses anxiety with intuition. The version that no longer mistakes attachment for destiny. The version that can love deeply and still stand firmly. The version that can wait without wasting life. The version that can move forward without needing everyone to understand. The version that knows that when God sends something, it does not need manipulation to become meaningful. And maybe, chosen one, this is the deepest reason J was never random. It was part of your awakening. It became a marker in your story, a moment you could point back to and say, That was when something inside me changed. That was when I began asking better questions. That was when I stopped settling. That was when I began listening. That was when I realized that not every connection needs to be possessed to be meaningful. That was when I discovered that God could use an unexpected encounter to redirect my entire perspective. And now you are standing here with more wisdom than you had before. You are not the same person who first encountered this situation. You have learned, you have felt, you have questioned, you have prayed, you have struggled, you have grown, and there is still more to uncover. Because what God is doing in your life is not limited to one name, one person, one letter, or one moment. The story is larger. The purpose is deeper. The timing is still unfolding. And the next part of this journey may require you to trust what you cannot yet see. Because sometimes the greatest confirmation is not another sign appearing in front of you. Sometimes it is the peace growing inside you. Sometimes it is the strength to let go. Sometimes it is the courage to wait. Sometimes it is the wisdom to say no. Sometimes it is the ability to say yes without fear. Sometimes it is the moment you realize that you are no longer asking, "Why did this happen to me?" You are asking, "What is God building through this?" And that question marks the beginning of a completely different way of walking through your life. And that question marks the beginning of a completely different way of walking through your life. Because when you stop asking only why something happened and begin asking what it is producing, you begin to see your story through a different lens. You begin to understand that some moments were never designed to give you immediate answers. They were designed to develop your discernment. They were designed to slow you down. They were designed to make you look beneath the surface. They were designed to move you from reacting to recognizing. Chosen one, there is something about this season that requires you to stop interpreting everything from your emotions alone. Your emotions are real, but they are not always your compass. You can feel strongly about something and still need to wait. You can miss someone and still know that distance is necessary. You can feel connected to someone and still understand that connection alone does not determine destiny. You can sense that something is significant and still allow God to reveal exactly what that significance means. This is where maturity begins. You no longer need every feeling to become a decision. You no longer need every thought to become a prediction. You no longer need every coincidence to become a confirmation. You can notice something and simply say, "God, I see it. If there is something I need to understand, reveal it in your timing." That kind of prayer changes the atmosphere within you, because now you are no longer chasing an answer. You are allowing an answer to find you. And chosen one, there is a difference between searching for meaning and forcing meaning. You have to be careful not to make your desire for certainty stronger than your willingness to wait for truth. Sometimes when we desperately want an answer, we begin interpreting everything according to what we hope is true. We take a name, a number, a letter, a dream, a message, a coincidence, and immediately attach the conclusion our heart already wants. But God is not asking you to manufacture confirmation. He is asking you to develop discernment. If something is truly important, clarity will eventually have room to develop. If someone is truly meant to walk beside you, their actions will eventually speak. If a door is truly meant for you, you will not need to spend your entire life convincing yourself that it is open. If J carries a role in your story, the role will become clearer through circumstances, character, timing, and truth. And until then, you can remain peaceful. Chosen one, that peace is important because the enemy of clarity is often desperation. When you become desperate for an answer, you can mistake movement for progress. You can mistake attention for affection. You can mistake words for commitment. You can mistake familiarity for destiny. But you are learning now. You are becoming more difficult to deceive because you are becoming more honest with yourself. You are beginning to ask, what is actually happening? Not, what do I wish was happening? That is a powerful question. What is actually happening? Is there consistency? Is there mutual effort? Is there respect? Is there honesty? Is there growth? Is there peace? Is there evidence? Or am I building an entire future from a few moments that touched my emotions? These questions do not destroy faith, they protect it. Because real faith does not require you to abandon wisdom. Chosen one, perhaps this is one of the greatest lessons connected to J. You are learning to trust God without trying to control the method by which God answers you. You may have wanted a specific person. God may have wanted to give you a specific lesson. You may have wanted a specific outcome. God may have wanted to develop a specific character trait. You may have wanted a reunion. God may have wanted restoration within you first. You may have wanted an immediate answer. God may have wanted you to learn patience. You may have wanted a relationship. God may have wanted you to learn what healthy love actually looks like. You may have wanted someone to recognize your value. God may have wanted you to recognize it yourself. And chosen one, that last lesson is powerful. Because there is a version of you that has spent too much time waiting for someone else to confirm what God already placed inside you. You waited for someone to say you were beautiful. You waited for someone to say you were talented. You waited for someone to say you were important. You waited for someone to choose you. You waited for someone to apologize. You waited for someone to return. You waited for someone to understand. But what if this season is teaching you to stop placing your identity in someone else's hands? What if J became significant because the situation exposed how much power you were giving another person over your emotional state? One message could change your entire mood. One silence could ruin your day. One interaction could make you feel valuable. One absence could make you question yourself. One appearance could awaken hope. One disappearance could awaken fear. That is not freedom. And God is leading you toward freedom. Chosen one, freedom does not mean you stop caring. It means caring no longer controls you. You can care and still remain grounded. You can love and still maintain boundaries. You can hope and still continue your life. You can pray for someone and still release the outcome. You can believe something meaningful happened and still accept that you do not control what happens next. That is spiritual maturity. And perhaps you have been placed in this exact season because you are ready to learn it. You have survived enough disappointment to understand that attachment without wisdom can become painful. You have experienced enough uncertainty to know that chasing clarity from another person can exhaust you. You have lived through enough changes to understand that life can move in directions you never expected. And now you are being invited to trust something deeper. Chosen one, what if the next chapter does not require you to chase anyone? What if it requires you to build your character, build your discipline, build your faith, build your career, build your creativity, build your health, build your relationships, build your boundaries, build your understanding. Build the life you keep imagining. Because sometimes we become so focused on the person we think is connected to our future that we neglect the future itself. You cannot spend all your energy wondering who will walk beside you while ignoring where you are going. Your destination matters too. And maybe Jay appeared at the exact moment you needed to remember that your life is not waiting for another person to begin. Your life is already happening. Your purpose is already unfolding. Your story is already moving. You are already becoming chosen one. Imagine what would happen if you stopped putting your life on pause. Imagine waking up and deciding that regardless of what happens with J, you are still going to become everything God has called you to become. Imagine pursuing your goals without waiting for someone to validate them. Imagine taking care of yourself because you understand that your body, mind, time, and energy are valuable. Imagine becoming so grounded that someone's presence is a blessing but their absence is not destruction. Imagine being able to say, I would love for this person to be part of my journey, but I will not abandon my journey to make that happen. That is strength. That is maturity. That is alignment. And perhaps that is exactly what this season is producing. Chosen one, you may also need to understand that sometimes God uses people to reveal timing. A person can enter your life too early. A connection can be real and still not be ready. Two people can genuinely care for each other and still be unable to build something healthy at that moment. That is why timing matters. You might meet someone when you are still healing. They might meet you when they are still learning. You might both have good intentions and still have unfinished work. That does not necessarily make either person evil. It makes both people human. And sometimes the most loving thing God can do is create space. Space for growth, space for healing, space for perspective, space for maturity, space for each person to become more capable of carrying what they are asking for. So if J represents someone you deeply care about, do not assume that every delay is rejection. But also do not assume every delay is a promise of reunion. Let the truth remain open until truth becomes clear. That is difficult for the heart, but it is good for the soul, because you are learning to live without forcing an ending before the story has reached it. Chosen one, there are moments when you will want to run ahead of God. You will want to send the message. You will want to explain yourself. You will want to fix the misunderstanding. You will want to reopen the door. You will want to ask for another chance. You will want to know whether they still think about you. You will want to know whether the connection meant as much to them as it meant to you. But before you act, pause. Ask yourself, am I moving from peace or from fear? That question can save you from many decisions. If you are acting because you are afraid they will forget you, pause. If you are acting because you are afraid someone else will take your place, pause. If you are acting because silence makes you uncomfortable, pause. If you are acting because you need immediate reassurance, pause. But if you are moving from clarity, honesty, respect, and peace, then you can move differently. There is no desperation in clarity. There is no manipulation in honesty. There is no fear in healthy communication. Chosen one, perhaps this is why God has been allowing you to sit with this situation longer than you wanted. Not to torture you, to teach you. To teach you how to distinguish impulse from intuition. Because both can feel powerful. Impulse says, do something now. Intuition often says, observe. Impulse wants immediate relief. Wisdom is willing to tolerate temporary discomfort for long-term peace. Impulse says, make them understand. Wisdom says, you do not need to control their perception. Impulse says, find out what they are doing. Wisdom says, focus on what you are doing. Impulse says, do not let them move on. Wisdom says, what is meant for you does not require possession. The chosen one, you are becoming wiser, and wisdom will change your relationships. You will stop chasing unavailable people. You will stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You will stop begging for basic respect. You will stop confusing inconsistency with mystery. You will stop calling anxiety a spiritual connection. You will stop calling obsession discernment. And you will stop believing that suffering automatically means something is divinely ordained. Sometimes suffering is simply a sign that something is unhealthy. Sometimes peace is the confirmation. Sometimes distance is the protection. Sometimes the answer is not, wait. Sometimes the answer is release. And sometimes the answer is, grow. That is why you must stay close to God rather than becoming attached to one interpretation. Chosen one, perhaps J, was the name that made you start searching. Maybe you began noticing patterns after that. Maybe you started questioning things. Maybe you began seeking spiritual understanding. Maybe you began listening to messages like this because something inside you knew that the surface story was not the whole story. And if that journey is bringing you closer to wisdom, closer to prayer, closer to self-awareness, closer to peace, then something valuable is already happening. Do not overlook that. You do not need a dramatic outcome to prove that the experience had meaning. Growth is evidence. Maturity is evidence. Healing is evidence. Clarity is evidence. A stronger relationship with God is evidence. A healthier relationship with yourself is evidence. Chosen one, you are not being asked to decode every mystery. You are being asked to become the kind of person who can walk through mystery without losing faith. That is different. There will always be things you do not understand. There will always be unanswered questions. There will always be people whose behavior you cannot explain. There will always be doors that close without giving you the reason. There will always be seasons when you feel like you are standing in between what was and what will be, but you can still walk. You can still grow, you can still pray, you can still build, you can still believe, you can still move forward. And chosen one, sometimes moving forward is the greatest act of faith, not because you have stopped caring, because you trust that God can handle what you cannot. You trust that if a relationship belongs in your future, God does not need you to destroy yourself to preserve it. You trust that if a person is meant to return, they can return with clarity rather than confusion. You trust that if a door closes permanently, God can open another one. You trust that if a dream changes, purpose has not disappeared. You trust that if J is part of the plan, you do not have to force the plan. That kind of trust gives you your life back. Chosen one, there is another layer you need to understand. Sometimes the people who affect us the most are not necessarily the people who understand us the most. A person can awaken emotions in you without being equipped to handle them. A person can make you dream without being ready to build. A person can reveal your heart without knowing how to protect it. That is why emotional impact is not enough. Intensity is not enough. Chemistry is not enough. You need character. You need consistency. You need mutuality. You need respect. You need truth. You need someone whose actions can carry the weight of their words. And if J represents someone who has touched your heart, remember this without bitterness. You do not need to demonize someone to outgrow a connection. You do not have to make them a villain. You can simply acknowledge what happened. You can say, this mattered to me. You can say, I learned from this. You can say, I cared. You can say, I wish things had been different. And then you can still choose peace. That is not weakness. That is emotional freedom. Chosen one, there is power in releasing the need to rewrite history. You cannot change what happened, but you can change what it means to you. You can stop saying, I was foolish, and begin saying, I was learning. You can stop saying, I wasted my time, and begin saying, I gained wisdom. You can stop saying, they destroyed me, and begin saying, I discovered where I needed healing. You can stop saying, my life was delayed, and begin saying, I was being redirected. Your language matters, because the way you describe your past influences the way you enter your future. If you keep calling yourself rejected, you will approach every new connection expecting rejection. If you keep calling yourself unlucky, you will interpret every delay as proof. If you keep calling yourself abandoned, you may cling to people simply because you fear losing them. But if you begin seeing yourself as someone who has survived, learned, matured, and grown, you will approach the future differently. Chosen one, J cannot define you. Neither can the relationship. Neither can the ending. Neither can the silence. Neither can the distance. Neither can the unanswered question. You are larger than the chapter, and God is larger than the chapter. This is important because sometimes we become so focused on one person that we accidentally make the entire future depend on them. We say, if this works, I will be happy. If they return, I will be complete. If they choose me, I will finally know my worth. No, Your wholeness cannot depend on another human being. Love can add to your life. It cannot become the foundation of your identity. And maybe this is one of the reasons you were brought into this season. To learn that your life can be full before anyone arrives. Chosen one, build that fullness. Create again. Laugh again. Dream again. Learn again. Travel when you can. Serve others. Spend time with people who genuinely care about you. Develop your skills. Read, pray, work. Rest. Become curious about the future. Do not spend every day staring at the door waiting for one person to walk through it. There are entire landscapes waiting for you beyond that door. There are opportunities you have not considered. There are friendships you have not formed. There are lessons you have not learned. There are places you have not seen. There are versions of yourself you have not met. And perhaps J was never meant to be the entire story. Perhaps J was meant to be one sentence in a much larger chapter. That sentence may have changed the direction of the story, but it does not own the story. God does. Chosen one, you have to understand the difference between a catalyst and a destination. A catalyst starts movement. A destination is where you are going. A person can be a catalyst without being the destination. A disappointment can be a catalyst. A conversation can be a catalyst. A relationship can be a catalyst. A loss can be a catalyst. Even a letter can become a catalyst if it causes you to pay attention to something deeper. Maybe J became the catalyst that made you question your path. Maybe it caused you to recognize that you were settling. Maybe it made you want more. Maybe it showed you what you valued. Maybe it revealed what you feared. Maybe it reminded you of who you used to be. Maybe it showed you who you could become. That is meaningful. But do not confuse meaningful with permanent. Some of the most meaningful experiences in life are temporary. Chosen one, there is no shame in accepting that. You do not have to force permanence onto every meaningful thing. You can let a season be a season. You can let a lesson be a lesson. You can let a person be a person. And you can let God remain God. That is where peace lives. And perhaps the next time J appears, you will not feel the same urgency. You will not immediately wonder what it means. Instead, you will pause and smile because you understand that whatever its meaning is, you are already becoming more aware. You are already more discerning. You are already stronger. You are already more grounded. And perhaps that is the sign you were actually waiting for. Not another appearance of the letter. Not another coincidence. Not another message. But the realization that you no longer need constant confirmation. You can stand, you can wait, you can move. You can trust. Chosen one, there is a quiet confidence being built in you. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need everyone to understand. It does not need to prove itself. You are beginning to know who you are without constantly explaining who you are. You are beginning to know what you want without asking everyone whether you are allowed to want it. You are beginning to recognize what peace feels like. And once you recognize peace, confusion becomes much harder to tolerate. That is why some old connections may begin to feel different. Not because everyone changed. Because you changed. The same behavior that once excited you may now exhaust you. The same silence you once romanticized may now look like what it is. The same inconsistency you once excused may now feel unacceptable. The same relationship you once believed you needed may now look like something you had simply become accustomed to. Growth changes your appetite. And chosen one, your appetite is changing. You are becoming hungry for truth, hungry for purpose, hungry for peace, hungry for genuine connection, hungry for consistency, hungry for something that does not require you to betray yourself. And that hunger is important because it will guide your choices. When you know what peace feels like, you stop volunteering for chaos. When you know what respect feels like, you stop negotiating for basic dignity. When you know what alignment feels like, you stop chasing what repeatedly pulls you away from yourself. And maybe J helped you discover that. Maybe that is why you cannot simply call the experience meaningless. It changed you. It made you think. It made you feel. It made you search. It made you question. And now it is making you grow. Chosen one, there is still a possibility that you have not considered. What if you are so focused on whether J was sent to you that you have not considered what God may be sending you through the experience? Wisdom, courage, discernment, patience, self-respect, direction, healing, a new standard, a new vision, a new relationship with yourself, a deeper relationship with God. Sometimes the gift is not the person. Sometimes the gift is who you become because the person crossed your path. That is something no one can take away. A person can leave. A situation can end. A chapter can close. But wisdom remains, character remains, growth remains. And the version of you that emerged from that experience can continue into every future relationship, every future opportunity, every future decision. Chosen one, perhaps one day you will meet someone else and realize that the lessons from J prepared you to recognize what healthy love looks like. You will notice consistency. You will notice peace. You will notice mutual effort. You will notice communication. You will notice that you are not constantly guessing. And you will understand why you had to learn those lessons before. Or perhaps J will still be connected to your story in a way you cannot currently understand. Perhaps time will bring clarity. Perhaps circumstances will change. Perhaps two people will grow in ways they could not have grown before. Perhaps something will be restored. Perhaps something will finally be released. You do not need to decide today. You only need to stay awake, stay discerning, stay grounded, stay prayerful, stay committed to your growth. Because when the truth finally reveals itself, you want to be able to recognize it. Chosen one, do not let impatience make you miss the real thing. Sometimes you are so desperate for an answer that you accept the first explanation that comforts you. But comfort is not always confirmation. Sometimes the truth initially feels uncomfortable. It might tell you that you need to let go. It might tell you that you need to apologize. It might tell you that you need to stop chasing. It might tell you that you need to set a boundary. It might tell you that you need to try again. It might tell you that you need to wait. Whatever the truth is, ask for the courage to receive it. Because you do not need a convenient truth. You need a freeing truth. And chosen one, that is what God is leading you toward. Freedom from confusion. Freedom from obsession. Freedom from fear. Freedom from unhealthy attachment. Freedom from needing to be chosen by people who cannot see your value. Freedom from believing that one relationship determines your future. Freedom from interpreting every delay as punishment. Freedom from believing that you must understand everything before you move. And as that freedom grows, you will begin to recognize something profound. Your life was never as random as you thought. Not because every event was predetermined in the simplistic way you imagined, but because even in uncertainty you can find meaning. Even in disappointment you can grow. Even in delay you can prepare. Even in endings you can discover beginnings. Even in unanswered questions you can develop trust. And perhaps that is what Jay was really pointing toward all along. Not merely another person. Not merely a coincidence. Not merely a sign. But a deeper awareness that your life has layers you cannot always see from the surface. Chosen one, you are standing at the edge of another layer now. Something inside you is becoming quieter. The need to chase is weakening. The need to prove is weakening. The need to force is weakening. And in its place something stronger is emerging. Discernment, patience, confidence, peace. You are beginning to understand that what is meant for you does not need to be dragged into your life. You are beginning to understand that divine timing can be slower than emotional timing. You are beginning to understand that preparation can look like delay. You are beginning to understand that silence can create clarity. You are beginning to understand that sometimes the answer you wanted is not the answer you need. And that understanding is going to change the way you walk into your next chapter. Because when the next opportunity comes, you will not ask only, do I want this? You will ask, is this good for me? You will ask, does this align with the person I am becoming? You will ask, does this produce peace? You will ask, is there mutual effort? You will ask, is there honesty? You will ask, can this survive reality? Not just imagination. Those questions will protect you. And chosen one, you will need that protection because the next season may contain possibilities that look attractive but are not necessarily aligned. Not every open door is your door. Not every invitation is your assignment. Not every familiar face belongs in your future. Not every emotional connection deserves access to your deepest self. You are learning to discern. And perhaps Jay was one of the first moments that forced you to begin. So when you look back, do not only ask whether Jay was sent. Ask what Jay awakened. Ask what Jay changed. Ask what Jay taught. Ask what Jay exposed. Ask what Jay prepared. Because somewhere inside those answers may be the key to understanding the season you are entering now.